Yotele, yotele, ayo, ayo, yotele. 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 Oof, if that don't reset some vibes in this ether, it always does. It always does. Happy full moon. A blue moon, even. Blue moon. You had me standing alone. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of tension. There's a lot of squares. There's very minimal triangulation. And an occultation and occulting of the great star of Antares, which is also an anticipated supernova. So absolutely adds to this tension and this fusion, if you will. It is considered a rival of Mars, and Mars being in Taurus right now, given all of the other energies, very much adds to restriction and rigidity in an incredible way. It's kind of like all strength, no flexibility is a very rigid practice, and ultimately can turn into a very vain practice that lacks safety in the mind or in the body. And while I think Mars and Taurus is like desperate for that, as if that is its only way, and occulting in Taurus is very much adding to that tension, there is a key understanding about these energies that is offering a transformation or a transition. Consider that the Western Sagittarius would also be, in indigenous astrology, would expand into the eagle or the hearth, and the ability to expand the chest, the ability to broaden the shoulders. Something that, though Mars and Taurus very much wants to understand, is keeping all very close to the chest. And that is very much the constriction and the overwhelm that I think a lot of people are feeling collectively. Hi, hello, how are you? Welcome. And it is not just fire, as we understand Sagittarius, but the earth and the hearth of the situation, the root of the flame, and that will come back to be very important. Not just that, but the oppositions of the polarities, I suppose, the antipodes, is an opposition of the Sun and Uranus. Uranus officially, I suppose, in Gemini. Officially in Gemini, last I looked was 2 degrees, which 100% made me think like terrible. The way people say terrible twos with toddlers, and it's such an early state of Gemini that those terrible twos are just as rigid and just as constricted, and assisted more so by this Mars and Taurus understanding, or lack of understanding, if you will. In indigenous astrology in Turkey or Turkey astrology and Mishka astrology, Gemini would be more akin to the serpent or the reed, and is not just air, but is the water of air, and so is the viscosity and the charge in that element. The space in between, the gelatinous structure of it, which perhaps offers us a little bit more, or the opportunity for more space in mind, especially as Pluto is retrograde. The outskirts of space makes these understandings feel so distant when space can be had in the mind, when space can be had in the body, should we create it. Even in meditation, like overwhelm is very much this like all of my pores are like desperate, like gasping for air, but like can't breathe. And to relieve or release that, the expansion of it, the opening and the receptivity of it, of every pore, of every eye, ear, nose, mouth hole, and then some, that truly allows us to transmute that overwhelm into space, into breath, rather than longing for something that is outside of ourselves, for that which is outside of ourselves, which is often the Western understanding of Sagittarius as in seeking, as in shooting far off in the distance without the grounding. And again, back to Pluto and this perpetual distance that influences more than we give it credit for. Distance in memory can still influence very presently as well, and that memory is very important. Also, with this moon, Lilith is also in Sagittarius. Black moon, Lilith, and the full moon are together, are cohabitating, which is so interesting too, because it's like a very literal fusing of light and dark, which is an integral understanding. There cannot be just love and light, and that is not to say to excuse darkness or maliciousness or what have you. That's not what I mean. I mean, the shadows define the light. And so when we abandon ourselves for fear of shadow, we fail to see light in its truth. And in that, two things need to come together. Very literally, like even in drawing, in photography, those shadows help to cultivate that light, help to define, help to direct that light. When you are aware of the shadows, then the brightness becomes so much more definite, so much more visible. And that's not to say, like, you need to learn about every terrible thing that happens. That is to say, you need to be very aware of yourself. When I say darkness, when I say shadow, I do not mean that is an excuse for the ills of the world. In fact, those are products of people and systems that refuse to acknowledge the shadow, and therefore they perpetuate ill will, they perpetuate trauma, they perpetuate vicious cycles. And so when we run from those things, we perpetuate those processes as well. Transiting series, with all of this, very much, especially because of what we've talked about with series in the past and the ways in which it calls to how we cultivate nurturing in ourselves, at this point in time is very much screaming overwhelm and intensity, but also recalibrating of all processes. And in a very real way, I think we're recalibrating collectively, digitally, energetically, and not by choice. There's more and more people investing in quantum computing, which are going to exacerbate the same problems that we have with AI and data centers now. There's more and more data centers, and not even just for what we're told, but to assist in these quantum computing industries and what have you. So it's like exponential heat, exponential like thickness on the wave, which again brings me back to Uranus and Gemini and this viscosity, this gelatinous, this sort of quicksand, rather than just air, rather than emptiness. It is a thickness. It is like when it's hard to breathe when it's too hot. Like, and that's been a very real thing too. Like pollution, extreme heats, the density in the air quality index being so thick that it struggles to go through even the tiniest holes. And again, breathing through the pores, like visually. Let's see. This Lilith in Sagittarius is an interesting assistant, maybe both. Then I think screams what it screams: puncture, perfection, permeating possibility. And in the fusing of a full moon and black moon Lilith, that overlay, like transparencies peering through each other, that piercing, that puncture, that it expanding in dimensional quality, kind of like 3D glasses, or the ways in which people can paint and draw in what could be viewed as three-dimensional because of the ways they use and distribute colors, which again, like I said, darkness and light, illuminating space, yada yada yada. Beyond transparency, that permeating illuminates what we are seeking in definition, what we are seeking in understanding, but are also so willing to hide, and like I said before, so willing to run from, so willing to hide from, when it is asking for acknowledgement. It is asking for, like, not just community, but like not just community and not just understanding, but it's asking for acknowledgement in a very real way. I think that's the way, so many ancestral conversations have come up with various people across the board, either thinking that it's nonsensical or not important, that as long as you understand love and light, you don't need to know your ancestors. No, you need to understand why it is you are. And there's so many factors to that. That's, and I don't say you need to, I say we all need to, because there's so much for me to still learn that expands my understanding. A friend of mine recently was talking to me about just the ways in which we digest food and how much that has to do with lineage trauma and forcible starvation and what have you. And I think because so many people are currently feeling that, that is something that awakens in the DNA, in the body's memory, because the body does remember. Even in things like circumcision, they do it so young because they think that the child won't remember, but in fact the body does. It's in the brain. It changes the brain, but we do not have the awareness, understanding, or integrative processes to bring that bodily awareness to the mind. And so there's a lot more research that suggests that it damages the brain in such a way that it leads to various mental health struggles and impulse control issues, etc., etc. Gosh, learning that, I've looked around and I've been like, oh wow, I'm surrounded by brain damage and people that are unaware of that brain damage, which is intense. And and again, this transiting series is like, okay, now that we know, how do we recalibrate? And now that we know that there's, this exponential heat from data centers, from technology, from 5G, like internet companies upgrading their modems and what have you, that we also already know have software that can track your movements through Wi-Fi waves in the house and sort of function as like a LiDAR camera kind of. If we know this information, how is it we are recalibrating so that we can not acclimate to that system, but acclimate to a system in us that maintains not even composure, but like balance, that maintains, this is perfect, because this axis of like of Libra and what was it opposing? Of Libra and Aries. Is that right? Is that right? Let's see. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. Remembering it wrong. Libra and Aries. Oh, lovely. Gotta trust yourself. This axis of Libra and Aries is very much that in the oppositions of beauty and pain, and the relationship that it has very much sort of collapses into confinement, and that is the stressors of living in a two-dimensional perspective, living in that mind fire, living in this back and forth, living in this or that, living in these rigid comparisons that constrict progress. And again, like I said, like all strength, no flexibility is a very rigid practice, and ultimately creates more rigidity in the body, in the joints, and the muscular structure, and the nervous system. It is as simple as bringing mindfulness to strength, which is ultimately what any warrior is prized for, not just for war itself, but again, the understanding that a true warrior is a warrior for peace, not a warrior for war. But we tend to lust for war, crave war in the self and outside of ourselves. You know, the ways in which we are rigid within is also the ways in which we crave war because we're at war with ourselves. The ways in which people reject parts of themselves is the ways in which we cultivate and perpetuate war in the mind, in the heart, and therefore in the collective consciousness. It is like a perfect projection. It is a perfect projection. And that's not to say like it's your responsibility and it's your fault. That's not to say it's your fault. That is to say it's your responsibility to recalibrate, to engage, to maintain a curious nature about what it means to calibrate the self. What do you do to find you? Like, do you just wake up and you're just like, ta-da, this is me? And that is, but sometimes we wake up not necessarily feeling ourselves. So how do we come back to that? Do we run from it? Do we run straight into something else? Or do we find a moment for breath so as which to expand, so as which to allow, again, the shoulders to drop and to spread, the wings to spread, the hearth fire to grow, and to illuminate and to be directed, not to be ignored. Does that make sense? Let's see. Oh gosh, okay. On top of this calibrating systems, recalibrating you, the relationship that Mercury has to this is also very much the not just communication that we have from mind to body or body to mind, but the associations that we have with it. The ways in which the mind replays these memories. Like, again, memory and distance doesn't necessarily mean anything because time is not linear. The body is still maybe reliving it as if it is current, which creates these cycles of hell in the mind, in the body, and again, therefore projecting them outside. So it is not just blatant communication, like many people dilute Gemini into in a Western context, but it is the associations that are involved in that. It is not the positive or negative emotion, but it is our attachment to it. It is our ignorance to that which is outside of it. It is avidya in so many ways. The superficial layers that perpetuate those processes when there is a root association that could alleviate that tension, that could alleviate that rigidity. And again, like I said, like just bringing mindfulness to strength, bringing more mindfulness to flexibility is how we create different relationships in the body that create and perpetuate more safety than it does harm, than it does resistance, than it does tension. As I'm like saying all of these things, feeling it very viscerally. Da 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 da. It is not just what brings you happiness. I think in so many ways we, again, associate happiness with something else. Like, what makes you happy? This, right? And we associate this feeling with this thing. And when this thing isn't around, or this person is around, or da 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 da, then that quality, because it is associated with that, is no longer to be found. Rather than seeking outside of the self, it is not what brings that to us, but it is where we are most receptive to it. Kind of like, in a very real way, how it's about the relationship to, like in bodily movement, like in yoga, for instance, the relationship to the movement and the story that your body tells about it opens up a lot of space for you. But when you're trying to mimic something you've seen before and you're only in it for what it looks like, or trying to recapture what somebody else's body looks like in it, then you lose the story in your body and you lose the communication in your body because now you're associating it with something else. And that creates resistance. That is when we overstretch. That is when we pull and tear, which is again that rigidity. That is forcefulness, not strength. And that is a lack of flexibility, which becomes a vanity and becomes a constricting rigidity, becomes a rule system that does not uphold the system within us that is asking us to recalibrate these emotional associations. And quite honestly, within the axis, where are you most receptive to that which you want to feel? Where are you least receptive to that which you want to feel? For instance, I think most people are very receptive to lovers, right? They're very receptive to the physical attraction of lovers, but they are least receptive to, at the same time, simultaneously, they are least receptive to honest intimacy and openness. And that is a very taut tension, and that creates ultimate resistance in the body. And it's kind of like even the ways in which when people talk about relationships as like avoidant or attached, it is not just this or that. Quite honestly, I think everybody's got a little bit of both in them. And that has to do with where they are most receptive to feeling love or happiness or feeling valued or what have you, and where they are least receptive to it. Most often, people are most receptive to validation and affection from somebody else, but least receptive to it when it is for themselves, when it is kindness to themselves. Even in beyond romantic, beyond physicality, like with friendships, a lot of people are real hard on themselves, and they would never talk to their homies that way. And that is exactly what I mean. Where like they're most receptive to that affection, but least receptive to it in themselves, least receptive to that honesty within themselves. And so consider those things. It is not a character flaw. I'm not coming for anybody. But when we can see these things, when we can see these points, like a to and from destination on a letter or a map, and then we can see the trail with which it weaves. We can see the directions that we need to go. We can sort of map that out. Very literally, what do you do when you Google Maps? You have the destination or the current point of locale and the destination locale, right? And in being able to input both of those things, we've got point, we can connect the dots and we can map the path in between. And so when you understand not just the stimulus, not just the emotion, but the association that it has in the mind, the heart is able to expand around those points and be able to see more fully. This is how we horizontally open up the heart chakra so that we're not just thwarted in the throat chakra and sore and forceful and running programs of ignorance far too fast in the body. All of this also very much directly relates to Venus and Jupiter in Cancer. For the elemental energies in Sagittarius and in Gemini in this opposition, this sort of axis, we have Earth and Fire, we have Water and Air. Venus and Jupiter, and Cancer specifically, beyond Western context into indigenous astrology, would not just be water. It would, in fact, be the fire of water, in which case it is the rapidity, like rapid bubbling. And I think that's why so many, the stereotype of cancers being, so emotional, or cancers being, I think they're like also very much associated with serial killers. I think Sagittarius and Cancer are often associated with it, actually. But where do we find heat and comfort? Like if you're melting chocolate, if you're boiling water for a specific thing, or like gelatin or what have you, we don't need to overboil it. We can, in fact, burn it in that way. And that is what Cancer as water is very capable of. But when we understand the root quality or the fire of water, then we can find a comfortable zone. And that's not to say, like, stay comfortable. That is to say, the water is comfortable. The water in us finds comfort. Not necessarily us. It's uncomfortable to release emotions. It's not necessarily the most beautiful moment you'll have to like ugly cry because you wrung out some serious coagulation and some constriction in you. But that is the nature of cancer. And in indigenous astrology, it would be associated with snake tooth, rattlesnake tooth, or with death. And that is the shadow side of the heart. That is the shadow side of love. And the ways in which we can integrate those understandings so as not to fear them, so as not to be controlled by them, so as not to be the feeling itself or the thought itself. You are the thinker, not the thought itself. You are the feeler, not the feeling itself. You are the dreamer. Are you sure that you're dreaming or that you are being directed in the dream? As far as squares, tense squares, Gemini, Aries, and the Moon, and Black Moon Lilith, by proxy, shout, memory, remember when, remember, and remember when. Remember remember who you are, remember where you come from, remember where it is that you truly want to go. Because, again, you are the dreamer, not being directed in the dream. Though many of us, I think, are being directed in the dream, in coming back to this understanding and that coming back to that remembrance, you find yourself being the director and the dreamer instead. You find yourself being able to draw and connect these dots and these associations rather than become the association itself. Kind of like people say, like guilt by association, or like you are who you hang out with. For instance, consider if you're hanging out with your worry and your self-dejection and your imposter syndrome most often, then you conflate those things and become that understanding. You become that association rather than to simply observe it and understand yourself as a separate thing capable of feeling all of these things, but not embodying them, not becoming them. You can feel it, bring it to the surface, let it pass. Again, expanding the heart chakra on a horizontal plane, understanding the eagle and its wide spread of wing, understanding the integrity of the spine, and uplifting, and the ways in which the heart itself, shoulder openers and what have you, chest openers, the way the heart itself blooms in that context. And we're able to hold so much more space for information, which is, again, recalibrating the systems. Like, you overclock a computer, you have too many tabs open. You have to go back through them and see what it is you really need to keep and what is not necessary, or what was because somebody else was using your phone to Google something or what have you. You can get rid of that stuff, but you've got to witness it before you completely erase everything, lest you lose a part of yourself that you did not want to. And that's not to say that we ever lose eternally. We can always come back to self and let that be a reminder rather than a fear. Rather than a fear, because fear will take control. If the yogis of dream space are to be considered, then we lead ourselves to quote-unquote hell in the mind and in the spirit when we conflate those things, become those things, rather than to just allow it space to breathe and to disintegrate, to blow into the wind like pollen, like dust, like dandelions. Let's see, another square with Mars, Cancer, and Aquarius. Given Jupiter and Venus and the ways in which that could exalt our capacity, like upgrading a hard drive. Again, Mars is very stubborn in these Taurian understandings, also understood as the eagle, but also night. Are we blinded by the night? Are we capable of finding shelter and safety in the darkest parts of our mind? Is that where we may be least receptive to joy, when we can in fact be infinitely open to it? Pluto retrograde in Aquarius is very much like on a rewind. On a rewind, and when we move too fast, what happens with VHSs? That tape gets all tangled. I know a lot of people aren't going to get that, but a lot of y'all will too. And retrogrades in general, for sure. It's a rehash, it's a rewind, it's a reawakening. But with Aquarius in specific, like technologically, again, like computing and recalibrating, reclocking the system, reacclimating the system, so as to compensate for the excessive heat outside of us or around us, so that we can maintain stable growth and nature, a real serious heartfeltness in the self, essential point in the self, that is not tethered to association, that is not rooted in association, but that understands root quality. Bringing all of this energy to a head, consider also that the true node or north node of these geometries would place in Pisces, which in indigenous astrology would be more akin to the flint and the sun. This is the light that can be more well defined, more clearly outlined. Shouldn't we not run from the night? Should we not be least receptive to the illumination that night really can offer, or that flame can offer, rather than take over? The depth of Pisces is also a wildly reflective surface. And light can carry in those circumstances. So, consider, and let us pull a few cards so as to see what this energy has to bring. Save these for a minute from now. And for those of you that are new, we'll take 3 deep breaths together. Oh, so grateful for you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for expanding on the frequency. It is an exponential growth with all of my friends and viewers. And stick around, because we'll be able to integrate with breath, not just in the breaths we take to pull cards, but an elemental breath to weave these things all together and also clear space for a brighter sight. Sorry, that song got stuck in my head. I love how these feel so organized right now when nothing else does. which is beautiful. Thank you for offering that, dear Luna. A harmony in the cacophony. Comes with understanding our frequency. Oof, okay. Perfect. All right, my friends. Much like we're hanging out, much like there's cards in between us, because there are, we're going to take 3 deep breaths together. And utmost, all I ask is that you open your body to the fullest breath that you can find, the deepest breath that you can find, the root of your breath. And notice any sensations that arise. In noticing, we begin to open our awareness to what those associations are. Through familiarity, not perfection. I know I said perfection earlier with Lilith, but familiarity. Practice does not make perfect. Practice makes familiarity in anything that you do. When you're familiar with your instrument, when you know your instrument, that's what people name them. Or no tweaks, you're familiar with your car and people know, well, you gotta tap it 3 times and yada, 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 and press the radio on and off and then it'll start kind of thing. Familiarity, not perfection. How familiar are we with ourselves in the face of the illusion of perfection? All right, loves. Take a deep breath in. And exhale. Take a deep breath in. And exhale. Take a deep breath in. And exhale. Interesting. I feel like in a very real way, we have a lot of heat and rage inside of us, but also that results in a lot of coldness, either being we're either received with a lot of coldness or find ourselves very cold to the touch with others. I've heard a lot on the grapevine of people just not really feeling listened to right now, which so funny given the solar season of Gemini. That is, the meant to be the observational skill and the unity of listening and receiving, and also the knowingness that we have with which to speak. But oftentimes I find that that's the hardest thing for a lot of people. Again, most receptive to being heard, but least receptive to listening. And that feels like coldness, that feels like rejection, that feels like dejection in a lot of ways. But is that, the heat of force against that pushes people back? Or is that the heat of the illusion of totality that constricts our imagination and potentiality, like cynicism in a very real way? Interesting. It's like finite boundaries between us and them, or between you and else in any context. The segregation, the separation of the self, the fragmenting of the self. When in reality, scientifically, that air and water, that gelatinous, that viscosity is a morphic field, constantly ebbing and flowing and growing and learning from that which we put into it from our own projections. This is the creation of reality. It's very alive. And it is constantly moving and morphing with us, with thought, with emotion. be conscious of the morphic field in you and around you, because it is not just you. It is also the un-you, the anti-you, which is also our adversaries, our aversions, our rejections, which is such a funny thing too. I feel like it's a repetitive cycle. When we feel very rejected by the world, we tend to reject that which comes our way because we're sitting in that frequency. We identify with that frequency, and so it becomes the reality expanding. And that is not to say, like, you brought this on yourself. That is to say, never let those circumstances become directly associated with you. You are not the association, but you are responsible for your integrity in the expansion. As am I. As am I. Interesting. 2 queens, given Venus and Jupiter, and Black Moon Lilith here. Doesn't surprise me. I think those are very much the energies that rise, and there are men on their knees, there are men falling, there are systems of power and the patriarchy falling. Because let us not forget, patriarchy doesn't give a shit about men either. In fact, they attack them just as well. Quite honestly, I would venture to say that the patriarchy is very much designed to keep men, cis men, all men, on their knees and desperate. And in that, like, it's like their first mode. Their first mode is attack the men, and the women and the children are casualties. Which even in war, they will attack women and children first, but it is to destroy the masculine nature, the lineage, the so many things associated with masculinity in some way, shape, or form. And I think that is a very important understanding, because men like to think that the patriarchy is for them, and it is, in fact, not. It is designed to keep them on their knees and desperate, just the same. On Queen of Diamonds, 6 of Diamonds, Queen of Hearts. Interesting, interesting. There's a lot of Earth here. It is easy to say that it's grounding. It is not just grounding. It is the ways in which we are receptive to the earth and the ground regulating with us. It is not just touching grass, but it is appreciating. It is not just hugging a tree. It is breathing with the roots of it. It is understanding that you are in a relationship with this tree because it is breathing what you exhale, and you are breathing what it exhales, essentially. This Queen of Diamonds is that relationship to the earth. That being a home, that being grounding, that being where we can also find safety, but we have to cultivate it. We have to cultivate it in some way. What are we doing to cultivate more safety in the ground that we find ourselves in? Kind of like, cleaning your fucking room or your house. That's one way in which we honor the space that we're in so as to align ourselves more efficiently. And that is just one enclosed little example of that. It is not just hiking, it is understanding where it is you're going, and stopping to smell the roses and identifying plants that you've never seen, or what have you. Like, even going on a walk with your friend, going on a run with your friend, and stopping to look at plants and flowers and understand the difference of the two, and take note of the life that is around you. And it will expand your world and your reality when you feel very isolated, or when you feel very, like, pushed and backed into a corner. Gosh, I feel like that ties all of this together really well. Because the Queen of Hearts is an expansive mode of heart. Is that horizontal expansion of heart. It is inverted. And so in many ways, again, I think that's the conflation of these things, where we're all too common as a society to conflate, again, back to my first example, the ways in which people are most receptive to physical lovers, but least receptive to honest intimacy. When we conflate those things, we rush the heart frequency, we confuse love for lust, we confuse the root for the cause, and we lose sight of what actually is. And in so many ways, that is the way even the best of people are very much more like their adversaries, or their antagonists, or their enemies, I suppose. Much more similar than different. Much more similar than different. And in being able to, like, speaking for myself, being able to understand that, or even being able to entertain that and hold that, has served me so much strength and so much protection and so much grounding in being able to meet these severe and obtuse and vile and infectious frequencies and cleanse them. Because if I'm willing to entertain the worst in myself, then I can also see the possibility and the potential of any given situation. If I'm willing to entertain the best in myself, then I'm willing to see just how expansive this frequency can be. And in that, you can transmute anything. You can transmute anything. This is why there's so many people that want to do something energetically about everything that's going on, but are met with blockages, but are met with resistance that they don't know how to handle, because that resistance is also something inside of you. 6 of Diamonds. What are we building? What are we planting? What is the nervous system connected to? Very much the ways and the ways. Nervous system, muscles, all will innervate into that, like, sacral bone in alignment. But, like, so many of us have lower back problems, right? So many of us have spinal issues, or we lose that fluidity in that motion because we're so constricted in that space, because the hips are so tight, because the iliacus and all of these innervations are so bound by a structure that we never even really consented to, in the outside world, but also within us, that we never consented to keeping or to maintaining. If we had been given the choice to maintain who we are based off of our worst memories or our worst trials, we would not choose that. And you do have that choice. You are not what happened to you. You are what you choose to make of it. It's like a prologue in a book. Yes, it's important. Yes, that's where we came from. Yes, that's how we've grown. But we're also so much more because of who we've chosen to be. This is something that, again, kind of on a personal note, dark past, hard past, for sure. In my youth, I think it was hard to separate, where, if people were like, oh, well, tell me about yourself, that was always kind of like, well, I am the way that I am because of all my trauma. But in reality, rather than owe myself, my brilliance, or my progress to the negative or negatory or pain or struggles that have happened to me, I am what I've chosen to do with them. And I've chosen to make very much the opposite of it. If I were to become anything like my lineage, I'd be a terrible person. And I often joke that, if anything, they taught me who exactly not to be. And because of that, I was given the this or the that, and I had to facilitate my own becoming with with the tool of that which has been, as a tool, not as a root or association. And that is how we break cycles of trauma. By understanding the deepest parts of our heart. Ooh, this is interesting. By understanding the deepest parts of our heart, by understanding how we offer that to the projection. Because this is emotional to manifest, emotional to tangible, really. The ways in which, even, if we're overwhelmed, we're sick of our job, the body will show you that you are done. The body will show you that you have not been listening. The body will show you that, like, time's up, we're no longer happy here, and your body's going. And I've felt that too. I used to very much think it was a curse just how voiced my body was, that I couldn't lie. It wouldn't let me lie. It wouldn't let me pretend to enjoy a job that I was miserable in. It wouldn't let me pretend to be in a space that I didn't feel welcomed in. And essentially, stress will wreak havoc on the immune system. And my body will not let me lie, and so my immune system will very much make that known. And then it is up to me to honor that or to ignore it. And if we ignore it, it progresses. And if we honor it, we transmute it. We become a conductor in it. What do you do with that charge? Again, full moon, Sagittarius. It is not just fire, but it is earth. How do you focus the flame? How do you root in it? Do you know where it comes from? Four of clubs, bottom of the deck. Zeitgeist, yes? Like the parentheses around it, the, bubble that it's in, the mood of everything. Four of clubs is fire, is elemental corners, is... it's making me think like how you can spin poi, and it is one point of fire, but in motion becomes like a circle of fire, becomes an image of fire, becomes an illustration with the fire, in the ways in which that image traces and curls and is able to expand in and of itself, is no longer just a still or stagnant or singular object, but is connected moments in time. And this is the cycle of the mind, and also the cycle of energy in the body, and also the ways in which we create that space with which we dwell in to hold those cycles. Four corners, four torches, illuminating the space in between. And very realistically, if you were standing in between the circle of fire, in between four torches, you would feel the heat build on the inside. We feel that in the body. We don't necessarily always know what to do with it. This was absolutely a learning curve of mine, is feeling that overwhelm, feeling that intensity. And something that I'm hearing a lot of is like, how many of us feel like it hurts to be in our skin, or like our spirit and our emotions are like pushing up against the surface of our skin, and that we need some kind of relief. And this is the ways in which this capitalistic system tricks you as well, because they will sell you relief, but it never brings relief. It's a band-aid on a deep, deep laceration. It's a painkiller for the symptom while ignoring the root cause. Relief cannot be had without releasing and transmuting and allowing that which occupies the space in you to not feel like it owns the space. This is where the mask becomes fused, because it owns the space now. We become our anchor. We conflate these things with our actions instead of understanding where that comes from and how that energy can actually be directed or used. And when we allow those things to take so much form, take so much space, it's blinding. It's like, you know, like if you're driving and there's like a bunch of shit in the back of your car, or like in the back stacked up, you can't see out the windows. That is the emotional baggage that we hold on to in our cellular memory, in the lymphatic memory, in the water, in the plasma of our bodies. And then we wonder why we can't see clearly, why we can't see ourselves, why we can't recognize ourselves. And that, again, Pluto retrograde and this Gemini Aries and lunar relationship, not just remember, but to be able to really see yourself again, to recognize. And I think Pluto retrograde is also offering the awareness that you do not have to look the same as you have before to be able to recognize yourself. We grow, we change. The body is recalibrating with us at all times. And we tend to hold it to the standard of what we have been before and guilt it or shame it, or, you know, hold on to this disgust or distaste for any difference, because we assume it has to look like it has before, because that's what we recognize. But oftentimes it's just a costume or a mask of what has existed before, but is no longer calibrated into the system. So we recalibrate. Recognizing yourself sometimes doesn't look exactly like you've looked before. And I've said this before too. I look the way that I do because I recognize myself in the mirror thoroughly. And any modification that I've had, the scar on my face, for instance, I recognized myself more in that. It looked more like who I've seen in dreams, more like who I've seen in meditations since I was a child. But it does not look exactly like I have been before. It was very different for a lot of people. A lot of people didn't like it too much. But that's because who they recognized was already in the past. And who I recognized was deeper in my heart and was unlimited by time. Maybe I was recognizing an infinite future self. Maybe I was recognizing an ancient self. But it did not have to look exactly like it's been before. It's funny, we either, as a society, we either constantly seek progress with no grace, or we're disgusted by stagnancy. And drop it off into, I don't know, what's the anti of progress? What's the opposite of progress? The antimatter of self. When it is not just this or that, it is the journey in between, it is the space in between, it is the lessons in between, it is the process of information that got us to this point, that has collected like a puzzle with many pieces. But you are not just one piece, nor are you just the piece that is missing, or that you haven't found yet. You're the totality of the image, the relationship to the image. And when you can hold that with honor, with grace, with understanding, then that fire doesn't rage so hard. That fire doesn't push so heavily against your flesh from the inside out. Trust me, I know. Trust me, I know how it feels. I know how it feels, and there is absolutely modes of release so as to actually find relief, rather than be duped into quick fix as relief, rather than be duped into having to seek more outside of yourself for relief. Or having to preserve an image of yourself. Quite honestly, I think the ways in which we try to preserve ideations of ourselves is a disservice to progress, is a disservice to growth, and is a disservice to the expansive curiosity and creativity that we really can hold, which are also notions that would ultimately be honored by these queens, essentially. Queen of Hearts and a Queen of, or Queen of Diamonds, would want to hold more space for those possibilities than to be held to an iconography or an image. Consider, much like I've said before, with the ways in which we romanticize Mother Earth as, desirable because she's so bodacious and beautiful and dripped in gold and the perfect body and da 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 da, when in reality, there's acid in her hair and the trees look emaciated or feeble because they're asking in series for care. But we ignore the shadow more often than not. Seeking a perfect image, not a familiar one. Outside and within the self. In a very real way, I feel like this is also very illustrating of, like, don't know what to do for the full moon? This is 6 stones. This is a river. This is your heart. Call your corners and give your burdens to the earth, to the water. Not like a landfill, but like an offering and an asking for assistance, because nobody knows change or grief or evolution or recalibration like Mother Nature. Because she will figure out how to acclimate, and it may cost us all our lives, but she'll recalibrate. She knows that shit. And it does not have to look like it has before. That is why time and surface and weather has changed so as to acclimate. Why planets even and their atmospheres and makeups, chemical makeups have changed drastically. Because it will, nature, life will always optimize growth. Evolution will always optimize growth. And capitalism mistells this story through sacrifice. Cults retell this story. They dishonor this story through sacrifice. And through sacrifice outside of the self. Rather than understanding what that means thoroughly within. Rather than understanding the recalibration, the transmutational process that can occur within. So as to optimize life, not sacrifice by optimizing death. And this even with Venus and Jupiter and Cancer associations. Cancer associations of snake tooth of the death. It is not just poison, it is not just death, much like the death card in tarot. It is not just, whoa, scary, but it is the promise of a new life. It is the promise of growth. It is the promise of awakening. It is the promise of new tomorrow. It is the promise of the sun waking up again. Even despite the fears of Antares supernova. And where Mars in Taurus is very attached to, fearful of Antares. Arrival of Mars and its supernova. It's like a fear of death. As if life stops altogether. Many would say, ancestrally and now, that death is not the end, it is simply the beginning. And I have a theory that much like a star goes supernova, explodes, and creates new galaxies, and forms new planets, and new stars altogether, or new moons for other stars, and new relationships and new dances, the spirit does that as well. And so perhaps when we feel death in a literal or metaphysical ego death sense, it is simply the supernova process of creating a new galaxy altogether, of creating new bright stars and new relationships and revolutions with that. And I've seen it in people too, where somebody may pass and a younger sibling or somebody in the family or somebody that that person was close to will like seemingly receive that piece of that person that they needed most, that they were most receptive to, or maybe least receptive to in themselves, but most receptive to in this person. And it fuses, and it fuses. I remember a man telling me a story, actually, because I told him this theory I had, and he's like, you know what? Actually, his oldest son had passed away, and his youngest son, who was very different, very opposite, was more the studious than the athlete kind, whereas the oldest son was more athletic. That the youngest son seemingly suddenly, had very marvelous skill in sport and found more connection in those kinds of engagements where they had previously avoided them. And is that just because they took it upon themselves to engage, perhaps? Is that because the spirit, the stars of this supernova soul offered them pieces of themselves? I think so. And in that conversation, that father thought so as well. So we pull a bridge. We pull a bridge to see what else is gleaming. because here we've got a balance. It is not all space, no time. It is not all time, no space. It is a fluid relationship so that the space can expand evenly in the time of cartomancy. Okay, loves. Much like the round before, we'll take 3 deep breaths together. Find the root of your breath and curiosity and sensation. Take a deep breath in and exhale. Take a deep breath in and exhale. Take a deep breath in and exhale. Okay, cool. Cool. I feel like there's a lot more excitement, but cherish the excitement, don't rush it either. And I feel like that's the thing too. Like, it's almost like we get so excited we forget to foreplay even ourselves. We get so excited that we forget just how sensual experiencing life can be. And once again, we have the point, the starting point, the end point, but we forget just how we navigate or connect those dots in between. And that's, very literal and in relationship for sure. But likewise in the mind, we are what has happened to us, and we are the emotional response to it. But we forget how we got to those places, or we forget how we feel getting to those places. We forget all the possibilities, all of the other exits we could have gone off, rather than the same exit that always gets us lost, that always takes us back to the same place that we didn't want to go to in the first place. Bottom of the deck. Oh, hello. Oh, hello, beautiful. Oh, hello, beautiful. Gosh, if this isn't like fucking femme power fucking pull yet again, we've got all these divinities hanging out with us. Does not surprise me. Do we honor them? Do we hold space for them? Do we offer them our honesty and our integrity? This is a funny thing too. Like as a collective, are we stepping into our masculinity, especially with Mars and Taurus and what have you? It isn't just posturing. It isn't just strong arming. It is very much the safe space. Like drawing a bath and lighting 6 candles, or how they do those like gift baskets where it's like all your favorite snacks or what have you, offerings, and the space that we hold in those offerings, so as to honor sensitivity, so as to honor wounding too, so as to honor the wounds that we have, so that they may actually heal, rather than avoid it, ignore it, and let it puster and fester. The moon, bottom of the deck, the Empress at the top of the deck. Again, kind of in 3 cyclical patterns, the reticular activating circuit, the circuitry of these things, the ways in which that electrical capacity expands, even, like very literally with the 3, like an Ohm circuit. There's a little illustration that I have in a meditation on YouTube that you can watch over and over again, and maybe listen to and breathe and bring your energy back to center. Bring your energy back to your root. And in the Seers Codex, there's like sigils within the reticular activating circuit in those triangular formations. There we go. In those triangular formations, so as to maybe break down our understandings of association and emotion and sensory information a little bit more keenly and with more awareness. consider in any capacitor on circuit, there's a positive and negative, the capacitor, and the actual frequency. The 3 is about that frequency. Yes, we identify the positive, the negative, and the capacitor, but we are not identified with or by either of those tangible things, any of those tangible things. We can be more identified with the energy output, with the frequency of that circuit. It's like you are not the outlet, you are not the plug. Even though that's funny, because even though very literally that's like there's like a Halloween costume where it's like couples, and the dude is the plug and the girl partner is the outlet. That is not the totality of energy. We aren't, and just like love and light versus shadow. Like, we are not just positive, we are not just negative, we are not just the capacitor. We are the frequency output that revolves around that. And this is why I love indigenous astrology and the ways in which it mathematically expands more so in Western astrology, because it does consolidate and conflate and constrict into identifying with one of these tangible things, which is why people want to be the positive so bad and they hate the negative so much, and they fail to see themselves clearly in the capacitor and fail to project or feel themselves clearly as the frequency, or struggle to maintain or find that frequency. The moon is the frequency. The moon is the energy. It's very literally just like radiating around all of this. Radiating around all of this. Dancing around you. Dance with it. And I mean that so literally. And also so very metaphorically and metaphysically. Equal measure. Like, I can't tell you how much I'm like physically seeing this. That it's like revolving and circulating. And it is not that you are the center of the universe. It is that you are controlling the speed at which this rotates. That you are controlling the ways in which this even circulates or attaches to or gets stuck in anything. And this is why retrogrades are so hard for people. This is why we get stuck in what has been, or memories of, like, enter new relationships but maintain these old patterns and sort of guilt this new partner for that who has hurt us before, or various circumstances of similar situations. If we are to uphold our inner Empress energy, then we are more full of gratitude, of compassion, of lightness, of unity. And it is not just brightness or lightness, like, I mean light like floaty, not light as in brightness. Because, like, notice these stars. It is not just for the star. It is the picture that the stars make, like a constellation in and of itself. And, like, again, Western astrology loves to conflate constellations, but it's also missing integral constellations. And quite honestly, is a broken compass as far as, like, where is your true north? Because ultimately, it's an inverted compass. So what they call south is actually your north. And I just learned this in so many ways. Even with the Seers Codex, like the overlays with Western occult diagrams in the same way have to be inverted, have to be reversed to apply to the energies that they're meant to. An inverted simulation, if you will. And in the root, gosh, this is coming up too, with everything that's going on in the world, with these murder women to protect babies laws in, what is it, New Jersey, North Carolina, something like that? I think it's North Carolina. I believe also New Jersey, but I could be wrong. Red states. That's the sacrifice. What did I say earlier about growth or sacrifice? That's this relationship too. That inversion sacrifices life. The colonial capitalist inversion sacrifices life. Quite honestly, even like, Hollywood capitalism, the obsession with looks maxing and plastic surgeries and what have you. Um, that is not to say it is not also affirming and gender affirming care for cis people, but the obsession that people have about it, like 22-year-olds getting Botox and stuff, without any knowledge of the scar tissue, is the ways in which we seek preserving life, but are actually actively participating in the consummation of death. Same thing with these fucking laws that seek to preserve life, but are actively permitting the consummation of death, of murder, of taking life. Ironic, given the identifier of the pro-life movement. And so, how do we erupt? How do we arrive outside of that? Because the Earth sure is. Rockets are exploding, volcanoes are erupting, systems are imploding. Trust that that is fertile ground for a more honorable, integral rise. Should you maintain that integral frequency, that central spine, rather than being spineless to the system, spewing nonsense. People that are unable to see the wounding that they cause in the world and who defend it so as to preserve their proximity to white supremacy, they will dissolve in those fires. They will dissolve in those fires because this is the frequency that will rise. And quite honestly, I think just with this energy too, just with the energy that the moon carries, it will dissolve their ideas of reality as well. This is why kind of psychosis is taking such a prevalent tone as well. Because people are trapped in that two-dimensional reality, desperate for their proximity to white supremacy as if that is safety. When, what did I say at the beginning? It was never about safety for any of them. It was always about fracturing the men and fracturing women and children as casualty as well. It will fall. It will falter. The stars are stacked against them. And the stars are stacked against them, but they are on our side. This is also where communion with the earth and with ancestor comes into play. The stars are stacked against oppressors and system, but they are on our side. And please remember that. Write it on your forehead, write it on a post-it note, put it on your bathroom mirror, because I also understand that shit's really intense and it does feel like a lot of stacked against us. And there is. The system is very stacked against us. The system is a house of cards stacked against us. But it is a house of cards and it will fall when we are able to control our wind. Speaking of wind, what better way to engage with our wind, not control, but to engage with our wind, to train our wind, like we're not trying to control it, we let it thrive as our kin, as our familiar. And in that, we can take all of this understanding and begin to understand it elementally in the breath. Western appropriations of Tantra love to use fire breath as or love to call a fire breath hyperventilation or hypoxic states created by breath. And that is because they're not actually trying to help you conjure fire. They are trying to misdirect. It's a ploy, an ignorant one. And so, with that, if you've done Cycle of Harmonies with me before, that is why our fire breath is in through the mouth, out through the nose. Because we build the fire like a campfire in the root of the belly, in the root of the sacrum, and we direct it like a laser flow. Like the way that DMT laser experiment is like a code calibration of reality. That is what we do with fire. It is not about hyperventilation. Even the amounts of like DMT breathing you'll find on YouTube is really just about inciting hyperventilation and overwhelm and calling that a high. And that's because they're seeking high. They're not seeking awareness. So I don't fucks with those. That's why I do my breath my way. That's why I made this. So, with the Cycle of Harmonies, in respect to the four directions, and in respect to all elements, we have fire, we have earth, we have air, we have water. But not just those elements, we also have ether and spirit. And we do not settle in the 12 because we know by the Seers Codex and through mathematical reality that the 12 signs is an internal vortex behavior. It is meant for mind fire. It is meant to implode. It is meant to collapse, really. And in expanding into 13 sign astrology, in greater understanding and nuance in the hydrogen bonds between each cusping sign rather than friction, we expand deeper into 20 sign astrology, which would bring us to indigenous astrology, not just from my people, but directly overlays to ancient Gaelic understandings, directly relates to ancient Egyptian understandings, and the ways in which those signs can move. Maybe I'll make an addendum to the Seers Codex with all of these like as overlays because that'd be fun. And it'd be fun to see and just kind of learn more. We'll see. We'll see. Added to my plates. But so in that, fire breath, and we're gonna talk about it. I know a lot of you have probably done this with me before. We're gonna talk about it, and then we'll do it all together. So you don't have to do it as I'm talking about it. Promise. And fire breath is in through the mouth, out through the nose. We build the fire in the root. We direct it, and focus it. We conjure with it and from it, like we conjure from root desire, not from our lacking. We ground that fire so as not to just be wildfire and, yes, fire alive, but not at odds, to be well placed in the body, to be well identified in the body. And earth breath is in and out through the nose. And this is something that you can always come to, especially if you're feeling a little out of sorts or you're feeling a little shaky in the mind or in the spirit. Breathe. Bring your awareness to your breath and remind yourself to breathe more steadily through the nose. It has the same capacity for air. You don't have to huff. You don't have to grasp. You have to expand the moment. So we breathe in and out through the nose 3 times. 3 times for each. An air breath, in and out through the mouth. This is where you can absolutely find a hypoxic state, should you progress into it for a long period of time and without grounding, right? However, it's only 3 breaths, so we're not going to get that far. It does create a bit more lightheadedness because you are clearing of the mind. The lightheadedness, especially in multiple modalities, but in traditional Chinese medicine, fainting even is a sign of too much energy in the body, which is hypoxic state, which is the grasping or the gasping for air. Because most often, most people are breathing from their chest, which is half a breath, and from their mouth, which is expelling and not utilizing the oxygenation of the blood as well as it could be. And so the organs suffer, the blood suffers, the oxygen to the brain suffers. When you feel that, we can do earth breath on a regular basis. But air breath in through the mouth, out through the mouth, preferably with your tongue drawn out for the exhale. Because if you notice, you'll feel that diaphragm, you'll feel your stomach kind of flex, and it's because your diaphragm is rising. And ultimately, though we feel at odds or in polarized axis of mind and being, or mind and body, or mind and root and intuition, or logic and intuition, or logic and creativity, or I should know better versus I really like this, and being able to actually understand impulse control. We unite those things by lifting that diaphragm so that it can meet the heart, so that it can meet the mind, as the breath is able to cycle those two things together. It is an alchemical union in this breath. We do that 3 times, and then we move on to a water breath, which is in through the nose and out through the mouth, ideally in through the nose and longer exhales out of the mouth, because much like water will separate and permeate even the hardest of surfaces, that hard resistance in the self, we can clear space. We can flow through stagnation, flow through coagulation, flow through clotting. Like water would permeate even the hardest of surfaces. Like water carves out space in the earth. And so with water, we do this within and so without. We carve out space in, we carve out space throughout. We do that 3 times, and then we move on to our 13th, in which case that is spirit, ether. And we take a big breath in through the nose, and we release any sound or tone or utteration that your body needs to get out. Because it is an instrument, and it does need to resonate. That is not to say screaming. Screaming is a way to hurt yourself. Like outright screaming. There are like very literal ways to learn how to scream without hurting yourself. You can totally blow out your vocal cords or like give yourself a hernia. There is a way to, like throat singing, for instance. There is a way to move that energy without you having to shove it or force it out. And so what I often come to is an Alm, which if you have read the Seers Codex, there's multiple sites and sources there's multiple sources that I cite in that document, as far as Western medicine, yes, but also empirical and peer-reviewed research as to the actual results and chemical changes and inflammation changes that happen in the body with Alm meditation, with just an Alm repetition. Sometimes really excessive or excessive hyperventilating breath or what have you tends to, a lot of people have had a bad time, or it makes them revolve more in places that they don't want to. And now meditation will always settle that. Will always settle that. In the study that I cited, I believe one of them was specifically addressing schizophrenia, for instance. And so with the vast mass psychosis that surrounds us, allow that to be a very simple 3-lettered emanation that helps you find central grounding and understanding and helps you mitigate those circumstances. And so we would do a big breath in the nose, and essentially the like of it is across the body as well, in that deepest root part of your breath, at the bottom of the belly, at the space in between your hips, into the heart, and expanding horizontally before you ever hit the tingle in your lips and the pleasure center chakras, or the vibration behind your eyes, or the fountainous energy that can erupt from our crowns. And so, if that all makes sense, you can follow along with me and we can do it together, my friend. Old friends and new OGs, trues, and new homies too. So wherever you are, and whatever space holds you, and then just bringing awareness to your breath. All you gotta do is listen and allow your body to participate in the conversation. Sip the air in through your mouth, feeling the coolness brush against your teeth and tongue, and exhaling through the nose, feeling the nerves behind your eyes come alive, ignite. Inhaling through the mouth, feeling the fire expand in your hips, and exhaling through the nose, directing the tips of that flame up and through to the tops of your eyes. Inhaling through the mouth, expanding that flame in the belly and the hips, exhaling through the nose, feeling that flame and that breath rise behind the eyes and come alive. Inhaling through the nose, feeling the sensation of air pass through both nostrils evenly, and exhaling through the nose. Now feeling that breath. Fill your shoulders, fill your belly, fill your hips. Inhaling through the nose. Feeling that air pass through the central channel of you. Exhaling through the nose. Feeling that breath irrigate into the body. Grounding, filling. Inhaling in through the nose. Feeling the body receive and open. And exhaling through the nose. Feeling that breath descend into the belly, into the thighs, into the roots, like nourishment. Inhaling through the mouth. Sweeping that air across the space in your mind and drawing the tongue out to exhale. Feeling that breath rush up to meet the other side of it. Inhaling through the mouth. Sweeping any dust or cobwebs out of the mind and drawing the tongue out to exhale. Feeling the breath meet the mind and the heart. Inhaling through the mouth. Feeling space open in the back of the skull, back of the shoulders, and drawing the tongue out. Feeling that space open and expand. Feeling that meeting point of energy. Inhaling through the nose. Feeling air pass evenly through both nostrils. And exhaling through the mouth, drawing that exhale out for as long as you can. Inhaling through the nose. Feeling the body open and receive, and gently, patiently through the mouth, exhaling, drawing that breath out for as long as you can. Feeling the body soften with every drop of breath that pours out. Inhaling through the nose. Feeling the breath soften in the jaw and in the back of the throat, and exhaling through the mouth. Feeling the shoulders soften. Feeling the heart open. Feeling space in you and around you open and receive you. We inhale through the nose to release any sound or that feels most honoring to the body. And exhale, sigh. Allow your breath to unwind and unfold and unfurl before you. Notice how your body feels. Notice any feelings that arise through each element. Perhaps you're feeling more space where there was a clenching before. And utmost, allow that cultivating of focus and that cleansing of elements remind you just how much space and possibility there is in you. Just how clearing that room can be so that you can see yourself for everything it is you want to be. Not just remembering, but recognizing your true frequency. Your truest frequency. In so many ways, this blue moon offers us that mercurial glistening. I hope that breath serves you well. Please also know that you can play with those elements in their own right. I wouldn't do air alone per se, but at least in pairs. You gotta focus, you gotta get creative. Do a little fire and a little earth. If you're feeling a little wacky in the mind, do a little air and water. Get the mind and the body open and receptive to that which you really want to implant. Not that which is being implanted. Because, oh, they're sure trying. And with that, my friends, I will leave you with this eminence. I will leave you to sit and digest. Don't underestimate just how much holding yourself can remind you that you are in fact real and that you are in fact capable of cultivating safety against all odds. And that you are in fact alive enough to move authentically against that which presses against you. That which wants to distort your truth. Be it our own thoughts, or be it the system that pushes against us. Kokoyes questa. I love you very much, because you are also a part of me. It's a powerful time to be alive, as heavy and hard as it can be. And it's an honor to breathe with you. And it's an honor to sow seeds of dream with you. I appreciate it. Thank you for being here. And if this hits some notes for you and you want to expand on it, then you can absolutely always book a personal reading with me. You can tap into your frequency or see what it is the body is holding. And if you would like to, we can also absolutely turn that into a personalized meditation. An interface with these things in real time. In real mind and in real time. You'd be surprised what you can change. All of that information will be in the description. Love you. And I'll see you soon.